first speaker is Beth Baker. She's an author, and her book title is Old Age in a New Age. And basically, she'll be speaking to you about what happens if you age outside the home. And for a lot of folks, that is an option that they may not want to hear, but it may very well be the option they have to deal with. So with that, Beth.
Okay, everybody hear me okay? I have a cold, so forgive me. I wish you'd known my grandma Sarah. She lived in Dayton, Ohio, and for her entire life she worked in chocolate, as she put it, either packing chocolates for Maud Muller Candy or selling chocolates at Wright's department store. For our birthdays every year, we would get a big box of chocolate in the mail. Despite her love for chocolate, Grandma weighed less than 90 pounds. She could play about 100 kinds of poker, and she never grew tired of playing cards with us kids. But when Grandma became 92, she was too frail to live on her own, and she moved to a nursing home. Knowing Grandma, she probably didn't want to be a burden on her children. But something happened to her after she moved there. The fun-loving person we had always known seemed to fade away and morph into a generic old person. The last time we saw her, we took our daughter, her namesake, to see her great-grandmother. Our little Sarah was just 2 years old. When we entered the nursing home, there was a long row of women wearing house dresses and sitting in wheelchairs. When they saw our daughter, they leaned over to touch her as she walked solemnly by. Their faces were filled with such longing and such hunger for life at the sight of a little child. That was the image of nursing homes that was frozen in my mind for the next 20 years. Now, in many ways, nursing homes have improved since then. Back then, it's hard to believe, but half the people were tied in restraints to their chairs or their beds. That was considered normal. Now that percent is more like 3%. There's better medical care, a lot more activities, and probably better food. But we still have a ways to go. Just about every survey indicates that people have a very low opinion of nursing homes, and indeed, many people say they would rather be dead than live in one. Don't you find it strange that we have accepted such places for our loved ones? Perhaps, like me, you never imagined that things could be different in a nursing home. You think there, but for the grace of God. But in 2002, while I was on an assignment for the Washington Post, I stumbled upon a remarkable story. I discovered that around our nation, visionary people were reimagining nursing homes, and they were coming up with some pretty radical ideas. For one, they believed that each of us, no matter how old, how sick, how disabled, how forgetful we are, each of us deserves to have a home, not an institution or a hospital, but a home where we feel we belong. Another radical notion these rabble-rousers had was that the lives of people who are very old and frail still matter, that they have meaning, and that disability shouldn't define who we are. By the same token, those who are paid to care for our elders also have lives of meaning, and their work should be valued and appreciated by the rest of us. I was hooked, and I set about to write a book to tell their story. I traveled from Rochester, New York to Seattle, Washington, from Big Fork, Minnesota to Tupelo, Mississippi, and I met some amazing people. At many of the homes, I was invited to spend the night. I had complete access, and I interviewed dozens of staff, residents, and family members. These homes that I'm describing go by many names, many labels: person-centered, resident-directed, Eden alternative, greenhouses, but I call them transformative homes. By transformative, I mean they fundamentally change the life experience of both the people that live there and who work there. People who live there have a reason to wake up in the morning and feel contented. And those who work there are actually happy and energized about coming to work. And together, the residents, staff, family members, volunteers form a dynamic, nurturing community. So how do leaders make this happen? For one, they begin not with a set of procedures or regulations, but with an ideal, a vision of a community of people, each unique and interconnected, who bring out the best in each other. Fundamental to this vision is a bedrock belief that each of us has worth and deserves to be treated as an essential participant in the community. When I first interviewed Charlene Boyd, the administrator of Providence Mount St. Vincent in Seattle, she explained what this whole notion of culture change, which is the label to cover this movement, was all about. She said, "The movement I'm part of stresses freedom and choice, community, wellness, but most important, it's guided by the residents, creating normalcy in these institutional environments." Creating normalcy. What does that mean in the context of long-term care? I went to Seattle to find out. At the Mount, as Providence Mount St. Vincent is known, normalcy means that children are a part of everyday life. The first thing I saw when I entered was not people slumped in wheelchairs around a nurse's station, but a young daycare worker in blue jeans pulling a big red wagon with 3 round-cheeked babies inside. More than 100 children come to daycare each day right there inside the Mount. That was normalcy. I talked to one of the children's parents, Maggie Lucas. She said, "My kids don't blink an eye at respirators or wheelchairs or people with one leg." The children really get to know the elders, and Maggie said this was great for her family because their grandparents live very far away. I interviewed the late Marie McWalter, a former nurse who lived many years at the Mount. They want to make this as natural as possible, is how she put it, so they don't make too many rules or restrictions. That was normalcy to Marie McWalter, to not have her life governed by someone else's rules. I stopped at the espresso bar, again, right there inside the nursing home, and had a cup of cappuccino, along with any staff, family, and residents who wandered in. That felt pretty normal too, as did the fact that there are no more nurses' stations. The Mount has done away with them, creating households out of the old hospital-like wings. with family-sized kitchens and dining areas. And then there was Kathy Butler, a resident not too much older than I. I looked for Kathy all day and couldn't find her because she was so busy. I finally caught up with her in the evening. A big cat stalked out of her room, one of the Mount's many pets. The cat had adopted Kathy and slept on her bed. Kathy had had disabilities all her life. She had lived in other nursing homes that she said ranged from hellish to average. Then, she said, here, a look of pure joy came over her face. 2 years ago, I woke up every morning asking myself, what will become of me, she said. Today, I wake up trying to decide which of the people I love here will I get to see. She was expressing what all of us know, that having strong relationships is the most important quality of life issue for everyone. In surveys, the single most important thing valued by nursing home residents, more than good food, more than good medical care, more than clean facilities, is relationships. It's what matters most and what traditionally nursing homes pay the least attention to. In fact, for many years, until recently, and in some cases today, nursing homes have deliberately rotated staff, making it very difficult for aides to form close relationships with residents. A cornerstone of culture change is what they call consistent assignments, where staff work with the same residents each day. And aides, even those who were skeptical about the idea at first, told me they found deeper job satisfaction when they really got to know the residents, understand their particular wants and idiosyncrasies. And they said that a feeling like family takes hold. In addition to forming true communities, transformative nursing homes honor individual choice and freedom. They don't try to mold people into the institutional regime. I read a story in the New York Times about a place called Chimp Haven. It's an elder care community for chimpanzees who have worked hard in research labs and are now living out their golden years in Louisiana. The chimps were free to do whatever they wanted. They could eat baked beans, hot sauce, and Tootsie Rolls to their heart's content, which apparently is hog heaven if you are a chimp. A staffer said it's all about the chimps having choices. I couldn't help but wonder if the chimps may have it better than some people who live in nursing homes, whose choices can be very limited. There's an example in my book that took place in Fairport Baptist Home in Rochester, New York. A new resident had moved in and the dietitian was finding out his food preferences. She asked him what he liked for breakfast. He said, "I like oatmeal every day." Wrong answer. The dietitian instructed him he should have more variety. Reverend Garth Brokaw, the administrator who told me this story, said, "This was a man who had lived fine for 92 years until now. Had eating oatmeal every day harmed him? Maybe he lived to 92 because he ate oatmeal every day." So fortunately, because they had this person-centered culture, the man got to have his oatmeal. Sometimes these limitations exist even when a home, at least in theory, is trying to give residents choices. Take open dining, which is a big issue you hear about now in long-term care. When my mom, the last year of her life, she had to move to assisted living, and she was told she could eat dinner anytime between 5:30 and 7. Well, that sounded reasonable enough. Eating at 6:30 or so would feel like normalcy for our family. But the choice, it turned out, was illusory. Mom quickly saw that every other person on her floor all filed into the dining room at about 5:21. They sat at the same chairs, every meal poured to a table, even though we were told there was no assigned seating. Not a single person dared waver. Some probably feared they would not get any food if they didn't show up with the herd. My mother felt like she would be imposing on overburdened staff if she came at a different time, so she fell in line. We did hold fast, though, on her eating breakfast in her own apartment. At first, the admitting nurse tried to convince us that Mom should go to the dining room for breakfast. We were told she needed socialization. Socialization. I'd like to see a show of hands. How many people like to wake up first thing in the morning and be socialized? Not be social. My mom liked to hang out in her bathrobe, do the crossword puzzle, and begin the day at her leisure. Besides, she was with the same people for lunch and dinner, which seemed like enough socialization. But we held firm, and Mom made breakfast in her own apartment. But she paid a price because the rules were that you couldn't have a toaster, no matter how with it you were. She loved hot buttered toast, but the last year of her life, she was not able to enjoy that simple pleasure. At places like the Mount, you can indulge yourself. If you're a diabetic, say, the staff will let you know what risks are involved in that midnight bowl of ice cream, and they'll offer you a healthy alternative. But ultimately, they believe it's your choice. Why? Because this is your home. That's why we all love our homes, no matter how humble. It's where we can be ourselves, where we can call the shots. Restoring that basic sense of belonging and control is a big part of what this movement is all about. Now, I've learned the idea of allowing people to make unwise choices is very difficult for nursing homes and for some family members. After I spoke at a gathering in Washington, I was approached by a woman who told me her grandmother was in a nursing home. And her grandmother had high blood pressure and was on a low-salt diet. All her grandmother wanted was to be able to salt her food, as she had done for the first 90 years. But, this woman told me, if the nursing home let her grandmother put salt on her food and something happened to her, she was quite sure her family would sue the nursing home. I took a deep breath and I said, well, the movement I write about would say, your grandmother's desire to enjoy her food in the final years trumps your family's well-meaning concern about her health. Well, you know what? At the Mount, there's salt and pepper shakers on the tables, and bottles of hot sauce, and sugar bowls. I was told, this is true, that when staff from other nursing homes tour the Mount to see what changes they've done, they are as impressed sometimes by the condiments as by any of the other transformative changes. And despite this flagrant granting of people's wishes, the Mount has not been sued. People aren't healing over from sodium intake. As far as I know, none of the transformative homes have been sued. And based on research that's been done with medical malpractice, I believe the best way to vaccinate a nursing home against litigation is to establish strong and trusting relationships with the residents and the families. I have to tell you, there's not only a moral and ethical case to be made for this change, there's a business case as well. Transformative nursing homes are usually the home of choice in their communities. They're likely to have a waiting list. At the same time, there's significant cost savings, surprisingly. When you respect the staff and form close-knit teams rather than a top-down hierarchy, when you create a sense of community and give aides the chance to do their job well, you solve costly problems like high staff turnover. When residents can wake up when they wish and eat when they're hungry, there's far less food waste. The happier the staff and the happier the residents, the healthier the organization. Fundamentally, though, we're talking about a heart change, a culture change, a deep transformation. It's not about insurance, it's not about regulations. It's about honoring individual worth and creating community, those two things. One of my favorite stories was told to me by aides at Fairport Baptist. We were sitting in a circle and I asked them what made their jobs different than aides who work in traditional nursing homes. They talked about how energizing it is to have as your job, your mission, really, to make each elder's life as fun and meaningful as possible. And then they told me about the horse. A couple years back, one of the residents was getting ready to celebrate her 100th birthday. She had only one wish. She wanted to see a horse. On her 90th birthday, she'd actually gotten up on a horse, but she knew she was not able to do so now. Well, somebody knew someone who owned a stable, and they agreed to bring a horse to Fairport Baptist on the appointed day. But her birthday dawned, and it was the rainiest, coldest day you can imagine. There was no way they could bring this 100-year-old woman outdoors. But the staff was so determined for her to have her wish that they asked their supervisor if they could bring the horse inside the nursing home. Her first question was, who's going to clean up after the horse leaves its birthday present on the floor? The aides promised her they would do it. Not only did they bring the horse inside, they brought it up the elevator to the household where the woman lived. And they invited some of the children who come to the on-site daycare, who of course were thrilled. After about 20 minutes, one of the residents, who had pretty bad dementia, announced loudly, "There's a horse in here." They assured her that yes, she wasn't imagining things. There was indeed a horse. And that unleashed in this woman all these memories and stories of her own horseback riding times that no one had ever heard before. I could tell that the story of this day, the day that the horse came to Fairport Baptist, was going to be shared for years, for a lifetime, as a precious memory of these aides. So what will it take to make transformation a reality for all residents and staff? The biggest obstacle, I believe, is lack of inspired leadership and imagination to see beyond the status quo and paint a vision that all can embrace. The idea of culture change is taking hold slowly but surely. It's gone from the fringe notion of a few rabble-rousers to a highly respected measure of excellence, supported by the federal government and major professional associations. There's a role for each of us in changing the culture of aging. It begins with a simple commitment that we as a society will reclaim elders as an integral part of the tribe. We're not going to put them on the ice floe and wave goodbye. All of us can reach out to people who are isolated by age and frailty, no matter where they live. We can also help create demand for these pioneering elder homes. We need to raise expectations and push for the transformation of all homes, including those that serve people of limited means. I'm almost done. The Pioneer Network is a coalition that has been striving for 16 years to change the culture of nursing homes and of aging. They urge stakeholders to organize at the state level to push for change. And I'm pleased to tell you, we're finally organizing our very own Culture Change Coalition in Maryland, initiated by Alice Heck, the top long-term care ombudsman for the entire state. I've witnessed a growing understanding within the field of long-term care that the old way, the traditional way, has got to change. It's now our turn. The time has come. Thanks so much.